What's up, Hokie Nation, and welcome into episode 22 of Talking with Teel, presented by State Farm. James Franklin is just about 90 days into his tenure as the head coach at Virginia Tech. What do the Hokies' NCAA tournament chances look like, and how competitive can Virginia Tech basketball be going forward? All that and much more coming up on this edition of Talking with Teel, which starts right now. And we record on Tuesday, February 10th, 2026 from the Tech Solutions Studio in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend. I'm your host, Carter Hill. To my left is our senior staff writer, Andy Bitter. Across the way is our managing editor, Mr. David Cunningham. Nick Brown, our director of media, is producing behind the scenes. And as always, we are joined by the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, David Teel. Teel, how are you? Good to see you.
Gentlemen, good morning. I'm well.
Good morning. Good morning. So, like I mentioned in the intro, James Franklin is about 3 months into his tenure at Virginia Tech, which is crazy to think about. I do want to get into some hypotheticals. We obviously, people talk about the way too early top 25, and we could talk about that for days if we wanted to. But looking realistically, and I know we don't know everything about every single roster across the ACC, but let's say ACC kickoff was taking place tomorrow in Charlotte. Where do you think the Hokies would be picked to finish in the league, Teel?
Carter, at the risk of being accused of a lukewarm take, I'm guessing somewhere in the middle. I think your top tier would be Miami, SMU, Louisville, Clemson, Virginia, in that range. And then you've got this great middle with Pitt, NC State, Cal, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech. You draw those names out of a hat.
What do you think, Andy? What you got there?
I'm in the same boat. I'd probably 8th, something like that. I'm looking at last year, they were 11th.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll be ranked higher than that. I think they'll be a better team than that. And I think the James Franklin effect, people will vote them higher as a result. But, Miami, SMU, Clemson reputation will be higher, whether or not that actually happens. I think Louisville, Georgia Tech, I think Florida State will continue to get voted ahead of people, even though I don't know if the results will match that. That's already at 6 teams there. Then you're in those teams like Pitt, NC State that have fared better than Virginia Tech in recent years. And I think the vote from year to year becomes, how did they do last year? And I didn't even include Virginia in that. I think a lot of turnover on Virginia as well, but obviously finished in first place this year. We'll get a little bit more respect in this year's polling. So I think the media votes from year to year, it is sort of indicative of what the previous season was.
Sure.
People don't differ too much from that, even though the rosters do. So the fact that Virginia Tech finished so low in the standings last year, even with the new coach, new outlook on this whole thing, I think if you polled Hokies fans, they'd put them way, way higher than that. And I think if you poll the entire league like this, less so, even though you see them in some of these way too early top 25, which I don't necessarily agree with those top 25 rankings either.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's interesting because Teel and Andy both listed off, all the teams at the top, and those are basically all teams Virginia Tech plays in October or November this year, just to give you some, context for how tough Virginia Tech's back half of the schedule is. I would probably have them around 7 or 8, middle of the conference. I think that's fair, and they can always overachieve. The last couple of years, we've had one team at the top that's been picked towards the front or picked even to win the conference that hasn't fared well. Florida State, Clemson. So it'll the preseason predictions from the media don't necessarily mean all.
No.
But it will be interesting to kind of see how where a Virginia or where a Duke are picked, given that they were the two teams that played in the ACC championship game, right? You're going to have Miami and SMU up there, but what about the Cavaliers and the Blue Devils, who I think even though Duke lost its quarterback to Miami, Duke will still have a solid team, but we'll see.
Teel, we'll get back to you here.
I didn't even include Wake Forest.
Wake Forest, yeah.
I perpetually underrate Wake Forest and look stupid for it. So I wanted to get them in there and get on record on that. I mean, they were 8-4 last year. 4 in the league.
How about Wake Forest's own Kenneth Walker, Warren Ruggiero prodigy? That's my senior offensive analyst for defense right there. I love that. They didn't
really run the slow mesh in that Super Bowl, but man, he was patient with those runs and really almost walked up to the line and then cut through the holes. And then it's man, that looked kind of like the slow mesh when they were doing. I wonder if Warren was watching somewhere going, that's the patience we look for at a running back.
Well, Teel, I'll go back to you here, and I want to pull a question from the message boards, actually, from back in the Berg, and this is a really, really good question. How do you assess, very loaded question too, how do you assess Franklin's first 90 or so days at Virginia Tech? Are you surprised at the pace of change in his first 3 months as a head man? Does anything stand out to date relative to other high-level staff changes you've experienced as a sports journalist? Loaded question there, but to consolidate it all, how do you evaluate James Franklin's first 3 months as a whole in Blacksburg?
Yeah, a lot of layers there, Carter, and I think the pace of change for Coach Franklin's first 3 months on the job was accelerated by Virginia Tech's commitment of resources. Because when you have money, you can get more done. And clearly he has. And short of hiring Chip Kelly as offensive coordinator and Mike Tomlin as defensive coordinator, I don't know how much more of a splash he could have made. Top 25 high school recruiting class, top 25 portal class. Albeit rankings are very fluid and sometimes unreliable, but still, it gives Virginia Tech that kind of oomph that it needed from the hire. So I think political writers always talk about the first 100 days of a presidential administration, and they try to give grades. And I think if you were grading James Franklin's first 90 days in Blacksburg, you give it an A, maybe a B plus at worst.
How many coaches don't get that kind of grade in the first month, though? The first 100 days. I feel like a lot of coaches are in motion. I think that's James Franklin's nature. I think he's just sort of a force, and he comes in and he's going to push his way of doing things, and other people need to adjust to that. He's the head coach. That's how it happens. I'd be interested if we went back and look at Brent Pry's first 100 days, how we would have graded those, because I feel like there's a lot of similarities. Hey, he's hiring a lot of people, transfer portal stuff, saved a recruiting class. I think we rate the same thing with each of these coaches. So there's a lot of similar hallmarks between all these people, but I do feel like Franklin is approaching this and not, on-field stuff in terms of transfers, building the roster, the recruiting class that he did, and he sort of got that head start because they hired him in mid-November to be able to get that head start into signing day. I think that really helped. But then on top of that, all the, physical changes in Merriman where they're doing structural stuff. They're trying to, where they're placing all these people in their offices, things like that, pushing for other changes that they need around the building. I think that's the part that to me separates it from what I've seen from other coaches at other stops that I've been at.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, the obviously the heat in the indoor facility was already something that was on there, but I mean, Franklin talked about even changing, what the training rooms look like. Like he's getting down into the nitty gritty details, the lighting,
don't need any soft tissue issues
in the indoor.
Yeah,
it does make sense. I keep making fun of it, but it does make sense.
But that stuff, right? Not every coach I think if they want to, sure, but not everybody does. But I think it tells you how detail oriented Franklin is, and I think it shows he's run a big time program before. Whether or not that actually matters, he thinks it does. And he knows from being at Vanderbilt, being at Penn State, hey, everything matters, including what the training rooms look like. And I think that's a little bit different because it's not like Brent Pry came in, first-time head coach. It's not like he's, turning that Merriman into a football-only facility. Franklin's pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing behind the scenes. And I think you'll see that come more to light, as his tenure continues.
It'll be interesting to see if that grows tiresome over a while. I feel like people, when it's a new coach, they're like, yes, he's doing just the kind of stuff you need to shake up this place and change it all around. You ask the people at Penn State when you're 10 years in and you're still doing that, I feel like it grows tiresome to people after a while. So I feel like that's part of the reason why a lot of these coaches continue to move from place to place. Buzz Williams moves every 5 or 6 years, maybe sooner based on how things are going at Maryland right now. But initially that's very refreshing. Over time, if it's just pushing for more stuff, I feel like that might wear on people at the time. But they're still in that honeymoon period right now where this is like a refreshing thing. And yes, you got to do it, got to kick people in the butts and make some changes because they're needed here. And quite frankly, when you're 3-9 last year, changes need to be made.
Sure.
Well, to back in the Bergs, the back half of the back half of his question about how to compare it with other transitions that we've seen and experienced. I think that's difficult to do because of the unique nature of these times and this particular hire. As Andy mentioned, a mid-November hire gave him a running start. And how many times have you seen a brand new coach come into a program where they've committed all this cash publicly, and you have athlete compensation and the portal? So it's almost impossible to compare this, say, to when Bronco Mendenhall took over at UVA and Justin Fuente took over at Virginia Tech simultaneously, or even when Tony Elliott and Brent Pry took over the respective programs, again simultaneously. This one just strikes me as so unusual. The comparisons are very difficult.
Teel, I got an interesting question for you. I kind of just thought of on the fly, to be honest with you. I think, obviously Virginia has reinvested into football quite a bit, and they had a heck of a year last year with 11 wins. But if you're a Virginia fan, I'm not asking you to speak for the fan base at large, but if you're a Virginia fan coming off the season you just came off of with the investment you put into football while James Franklin is doing his thing in Blacksburg, how are you feeling right now about the future of your program and Virginia Tech's program going forward, if you're a Virginia Cavalier fan, Teel?
I think if you're a Cavalier, Carter, you're pretty encouraged and optimistic because their retention rate was okay, not great, but the offensive line coming back for Virginia should be the program's best in quite some time. And they did well in the portal with two quarterbacks in Prabula and Eli Holstein. And they've got Cam Robinson coming back on defense. They did really well in the portal in the secondary. I think if I'm Virginia, am I expecting to win 11 games again next year? Probably not. But I like my chances of competing right now.
Taking the temperature on Virginia Tech's NCAA tournament chances right now. Hokies fought NC State over the weekend in hoops, 82-73 down in Raleigh. You have a huge one coming up with Clemson tomorrow night down in Little John Coliseum. What is your opinion on the Hokies' chances to get to the tournament, Teel, and how must-win are either Clemson and Miami coming up over the next couple of weeks?
Oh, incredibly large, Carter, when it comes to the resume and building credentials that will resonate come Selection Sunday with the committee. What are they, 55 on the net with two quad ones and 4 quad one opportunities to come, all on the road, starting tomorrow night down in Pickens County. And, David and Chris talked at length about the NC State game yesterday. I watched it on DVR, and I think like most Hokies fans, if I'm a fan watching that, I'm disappointed in that performance. Disappointed defensively in just how slow they came out of the gate. And I expected more urgency from that team given the situation.
Yeah, and I think that's fair to expect it tomorrow against Clemson. I mean, the Hokies cannot come slow out of the gate. They, especially coming off an open week too. I was surprised about I think it's 9-all through the first media timeout, and then NC State went on a 14-1 run. It's like you can't allow that early run. You have to be tighter. You have to be more connected, especially coming off of a 6-7 day break where you are fresh and you have better legs, and they're coming off the road trip, not you. And I just thought that Tech got behind too early and then never quite got over the hump again. And it's kind of playing whack-a-mole a little bit. One thing It's like, hey, Neoclis of Dallas is shooting his back. And then Ben Hammond goes over. And it's like, hey, we got to stop here. And then we can't score here. Hey, we score here. And we can't get a stop here. And they've got a lot of fires to put out right now. And I'm curious to see how they do that on Wednesday.
They seem to do that against good teams. When they play good teams, I seem to tune in, and it's like they're down 15 in the first half. It's like, well, that's not a way to beat a good team. Did they ever lead against Louisville, Duke, or NC State?
I think it was 3-2 Saturday, but that was about
it.
Yeah, that was about it.
You're not giving yourself much of a chance if you get behind against these good teams. And I mean, I'm not a bracketologist by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't know. I look at this team and I just don't see it. I don't see what I've checked some of the projections and their first 4 out or something like that. I'm surprised they're even that high, honestly, because I just lately they haven't seemed very competitive in these games against teams that will be in the tournament. And sometimes that's how I would look at some of these tournament projections is like, okay, can they compete against anybody that's going to be actually in this tournament as opposed to beating teams that'll be in the NIT or worse? And I don't know. It just eye test. They don't seem to pass it with me right now.
I think the weird thing is that they've played good basketball for long stretches, but they're not playing 40 minutes. Like the Duke game, they got behind. They got behind early, ended the half on an 11-4 run, and then they were basically within 6, but never quite got over the hump. Right? It was a competitive game, but they were never really going to win. NC State. They go down early, come back. There were 4 different occasions when they pull within 6, got it down to 3, and then never got over the hump. The Louisville game, they got blown out to end the first half, and then we're trailing by double digits. And it's one of these things where it's like there are long stretches of the game where they're just not really in it, and you can't really overcome that. And I'm interested to see, they've got a couple opportunities left. Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, Virginia.
Do you like their chances at winning any of those road games, though?
I think they can.
The last 2, I don't. North Carolina.
I think they can beat Miami. Clemson. I mean, Clemson's really, really good, really balanced. North Carolina obviously just beat Duke and is playing really good, really well right now. And Virginia, I mean, I would say they've got a chance maybe to win 1. And
if
not
they
good
beat
enough.
Miami and hold court in all the home games, Florida State, Wake Forest, and Boston College, which is those are not good teams. But if they do that, do you think that's enough?
No. I think
you need help at that point.
I think they need another one. So that's the tough part. And they will have played 13 quadrant 1 games, but have won maybe 3 of them. That's a problem. You got to win more than that.
Yeah, I think, and Teel, go ahead and chime in here if you want. I think Virginia Tech needs to win both the Miami and the Clemson games at this point in the season. Because to your point, I don't know if you're going to go to the Smith Center and win at Carolina. You've only won twice at UVA in the last 10 years. I think you have to win both the Miami and the Clemson game. Now, crazier things have happened. Obviously, you have the ACC tournament too, but I do think, Teel, you have to win both the Miami and the Clemson game at this point in the season to feel good about yourself going forward.
To feel good about your chances, yes, Carter. But let me remind folks that North Carolina, I believe, was 1-12 in quad 1 wins last year and sneaked into the first 4. Now, granted, Bubba Cunningham, the Tar Heels athletic director, was on the selection committee, and maybe that was a bone thrown his way by his colleagues. And yes, it is the North Carolina brand. But it does matter who you're competing against on that bubble. I think this does speak to the notion of, we have to expand the tournament to be more inclusive. If this is what we're talking about on the bubble, I think it's pretty clear that if you want to expand it, fine, but it's certainly not necessary by any stretch, because you are not excluding any teams that really have much of a chance to make noise come March. And David, I know you were struck, as was I, by Mike Young's comments yesterday about the fundamental defensive breakdowns that the Hokies had against NC State. And so after he made those remarks on the Zoom, I fired up the DVR, and literally on the first possession, Ben Hammond gets beat on a simple backdoor cut for a layup. And then a few minutes later, after Christian Gerdak, comes in the game, he gets beat on a back cut. Mike Young pulls him, puts Antonio Dorn in. He gets beat easily for a bucket. And then the possession that you cited, which was spot on. Shoot hits the back-to-back threes in the second half to make it 54-51. They're within 3. The momentum is clearly there. And then instantly, total breakdown in transition off one of your own makes. You don't get back on D, and you give up a wide open tray to Trey Holloman, and he buries it, and you're down 6, and you really never recover.
Yeah, I look at this team, when I watch them defensively, it's like they I don't want to say they take possessions off, but like not all 5 players are locked in and cohesive at all times. You know, Paul McNeil is one of the best 3-point shooters in the ACC. And the Hokies, it was like they were slow to react when NC State's running a pin down action for him.
They kept on going underneath the screen, yeah.
And maybe that's how they want to defend it. I know that's how they want to defend some of the Darian Williams stuff. But like, you have to be on alert at all times. And I was just a little surprised. The action Teel was referencing at the beginning of the game, simple action that Tech used to run for Hunter Couture all the time, where it looks like you're going to run a pin down action and they back cut wide open, and Ben Hammond wasn't paying attention. And it's simple stuff like that where, you know, you don't take 1 or 2 or 3 possessions off, and all of a sudden you're in the game. And that's Mike Young talked about the little things yesterday. How do you clean those up? And we've seen little things, including late in games, bite them this year. They have to be better at some of the fundamental stuff. And if they can get Tyler Johnson back, that would help. Do they get Tyler Johnson back this week? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, we'll see about that. I do want to talk, looking at the NCAA tournament right now as a whole, you look at all the hype that Virginia Tech had coming into the season and the investment that was made to basketball coming into the season. If the Hokies were to miss the NCAA tournament, how much of a missed opportunity does that feel like, do you think? And we'll go roundtable with this, but in another way to describe it too, like how crucial is it for Virginia Tech to get to the NCAA tournament this year? Obviously, you have a nice young core coming back next season, theoretically, but with everything put into this season after how last year went, how crucial, David, and then we'll go roundtable, is it for the Hokies to get to the NCAA tournament?
I think it's huge. They've dealt with so many injuries. Toby Lawal out for a month and a half, Tyler Johnson out for a month and a half. They've overcome it in some aspects, and they've beaten everybody they should have beaten, with the exception of maybe Stanford. But if you want to get in the NCAA tournament, you have to win quadrant 1 games, and they've had too many mistakes here and there and let them slip away. They need to make it. There was a great investment this offseason in the roster construction. Mike Young brought in Chester Frazier, and he refreshed the staff. And I think this is a good roster. I think this is an NCAA tournament roster, but they have not played like it. And I think the fan base needs something to cling to. I mean, the Hokies haven't made the tournament since 2022. 2021 as an at-large. Mm-hmm. We're talking about 6 years. 5 years. That's really difficult given how close the Hokies have been. They've been in the NIT conversation or on the bubble every single year with the exception of last. I think it's important that they get in there and turn the page. But the tough part is they weren't given a favor by the schedule gods. Right? They've got to end the season at North Carolina, at Virginia, but you got to win games. You got to play the schedule that you're dealt. And I think it is very, very important. I'm not sure that it'll happen. And that's the tough part, because I think a lot of people came in this year with the way the Hokies had assembled their roster. You get Avdalis late. It's, hey, this team can win a lot of games. And when you're constantly reinventing yourself because of injuries, I think it makes it really difficult. And they've played okay, and they're clearly in the conversation. They're one of the first 4 out. But you have to be better than that. And everybody over there in Hahn-Hurst, they know that. I think it'll be a really disappointed, campus, honestly, and athletic department if they don't end up making it.
Yeah, I think they had a chance early in the season, and I think expectations grew that first week in November when Abdallas goes off against Providence.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, man, they've got a dude in this guy, and everybody's talking first-round pick. When Virginia Tech has a first-round pick, usually expectations are pretty high. The last one was Nikhil Alexander Walker, correct? And he was on those tournament teams with Buzz. So a school like Virginia Tech, when you have a talent like that is expected to be a first-round talent, first-round pick, I think expectations go up with that. And he hasn't come near that game since then. I mean, it was just like this unconscious shooting performance. All the basketball heads on Twitter are going crazy. It's like, wow, steal of the century for Virginia Tech here. This guy's going to be the greatest thing ever. And it just hasn't worked out that way. So I think expectations ramped up so much early on that now comes back to earth a little bit. And maybe it's more realistic about where they were, borderline NCAA team. But when you start out, you come out of the gate like that and have such a performance like that, I think that really changes the narrative of what the season could be, and they're just not quite living up to it.
David, where were the Hokies picked in the preseason ACC?
I don't know. 11th maybe or 12th?
Nick says 12th. We'll trust him.
I believe it was 12. So the expectations were not external. I think the expectations were more internal, meaning the program and the fan base. And perhaps even we in the Virginia media bought into it a little more than we should have. And I think a lot of it was, as Andy said, the Neo effect and this notion of a first-round draft choice coming over from the international game with professional experience, who clearly would have had options had he wanted to really explore them, but chose Virginia Tech over the NBA. I mean, he really toyed with the notion of declaring for the draft. So maybe we bought into it a little too much. And then the injury bug strikes, and now they're sitting there on the bubble, and they got to go win games. And I listened to Chris yesterday with you, David, and I heard him say that he would even trade, despite Conti Forum being a house of horrors, he'd rather go on the road to play BC if he could only get a home game against Clemson. And my first thought was, be careful what you wish for, because the Tigers have won 14 consecutive ACC road games, which is the second longest streak in history. Think about that. The Clemson Tigers own the second longest road conference winning streak in this league's storied history.
Are they at Duke tomorrow or tonight maybe?
No,
Saturday.
after the
Oh, yeah,
Hokies.
after the Hokies.
Wednesday, Hokies go to Clemson on Wednesday, and then Clemson goes to Duke on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, Clemson's really good. And that's the tough part. The league is much better. The league is much improved. And I think you've seen, Teel wrote a great article in January about the investment. The investment's up. Virginia Tech invested. Miami invested in new coach in Jay Lucas. Brad Brownell's had investment. Ryan Odom got it at Virginia.
NC State's.
Yeah, and it's one of these things where you have to show it. You have to win. And yeah, I think a lot of the expectations were more internal. I think a lot of people looked at this Virginia Tech roster and didn't, from the outside, and did not expect it to be an NCAA tournament team. I think a lot of us, I looked at it and said they have a chance. And
Mike Young was certainly excited about the roster preseason.
And I think it is a talented group, but the tough part is that they've had guys go out with injuries. They miss Toby Lawal from Thanksgiving to second week of January, and then they miss Tyler Johnson from December, right before Christmas, to he's still out. And it's one of those things where it has to be next man up, but the next man clearly isn't as good, and they're not really whole, and it's going to take a lot, I think, for them to do something special. I think they can win one and be in the conversation and have a legitimate chance, but to feel good about it, they probably need a second. And it might take a miracle. It might take a win in the Dean Dome. It might take a win in Charlottesville. Yeah, and
Might take a run in Charlotte. That's what
Yeah,
the
that's very
tournament is
true.
this year. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how they got in the last time they got in.
Yeah.
That's very true. That's very true. Teo, I don't mean to put you on the spot at all. We were talking about Abdallas, obviously, and all the hype coming from, internally. But I actually remember sitting down with you and David at our Radio Row perch at ACC Tip-Off in October. And didn't Will Wade have some crazy quote about Neo Abdallas, about how Virginia Tech got a great one internationally?
Yes, he 100% did. That's a great pull by you, Carter. And other coaches told me the same about Neo and his game. And as we talked about last week, the most recent mock draft I saw still has him in the first round. Now, granted, in the mid-20s, but still in the first round of the draft. And as we saw Saturday, he can shoot it when perhaps healthy. Sounds like he's been dealing with some things, but had all last week to kind of get his mechanics right and lost that hitch. And I thought he was drifting a lot on his shots, and he looked more squared up on Saturday. But when he's feeling it, don't you have to get him more than 6 shots?
Yeah. And I think this is kind of I think Mike Young's trying to figure it out. He's trying to balance all these things. And I thought against NC State, Teel, that they went inside to Amani Hansberry a lot, and it just wasn't falling, and they kept trying to do it. Like, kept trying to back down Darian Williams. He's got a little bit of a size mismatch, and thought Hansberry got decent looks, but he's throwing up a shot. They've just had too many guys in different moments be just kind of like, I don't want to say non-factors, but just way too quiet. I thought Bedford and Shoot gave him a little bit of a lift, and I thought Lawal was okay, but there wasn't anybody in this game that you're like, man, that's Virginia Tech's best player. If it's Abdallas, well, they didn't get him enough shots. I thought Hansberry was good in the second half, but they just run into this problem where Andy mentioned it, starting slow. You can't afford to start slow in these games against really good teams, because then you're playing from behind. And I think offensively, as good as Mike Young is as an offensive mind, this team, because of the pieces, because of Abdallas, they haven't played the same way as some of his past teams have, and they haven't been nearly as efficient. And I think it's been a problem he's been trying to tinker with all year, and they still haven't figured it out. And they've got basically 5-6 games to kind of figure it out and try to cap off their season, and that's a lot of pressure.
I want to go roundtable with this again real fast because, again, we mentioned there's theoretically a younger core coming back next season. Again, you never know in today's day and age, Teel, but, with the budget increase to Virginia Tech athletics and with the investment into the football program, we talked about the investment into the basketball program for this year. But how do you feel about Virginia Tech's positioning to compete in basketball year in and year out in this day and age in the ACC?
Carter, contend in the ACC year in and year out strikes me as a very heavy lift for Virginia Tech. Yes, they are putting more money into athletics. How much of that is going to go to men's basketball? I don't think we know that yet, but I will read you some figures from fiscal year 2025 men's basketball budgets. Louisville, $19.9 million, North Carolina, $16.8, UVA, $16.7, Florida State, $15.1, NC State, $12.8, Virginia Tech, $11.1. That's last among those 6 public schools. I still don't have the documents for Clemson and Georgia Tech. But they're going to need to increase funding significantly for basketball to be consistently competitive in this league. And let's remember, very rare is the occasion when the Hokies are actually fighting for, say, first or second place in this league. There was the wonky COVID season where I think Virginia finished 13-4 atop the league, and Virginia Tech was 9-4. just because they all played such varied schedules. And then in 2007, Seth Greenberg's team lost the regular season finale at home to Clemson when they could have clinched a share of first place in the ACC. But even Buzz's best team, the 2019 Sweet 16 squad, finished 4 games out of first place and in 5th, and was the 5th seed in the ACC tournament. So, history would tell you that this is a very difficult lift for Hokies men's basketball.
Especially when you're putting as much money into the football program as you are. And everybody knows that that's where you need to be putting it, right?
And plus you're getting nothing from Cassell.
Well,
I feel if they invest, I feel like you have to invest something into the facilities there that you can start turning a profit. And then you can justify spending more on basketball if Cassell is pulling its weight and getting some revenue from that. I mean, I covered Auburn basketball when they stunk. Jeff Lebo was the coach, and then Tony Barbie came in. They were awful, and they played in this just dungeon of a building. It was Beard Eves Memorial Coliseum, this dark, dank, horrible. I mean, Virginia actually came down and played one time, and the Virginia writers, so I know the Virginia writers, like, this is where they played the games down here. Like the post game was in like a classroom or something like that. I mean, it was awful. And they built and they invested in this Auburn arena, which was this great place. And that's not all of it, because Tony Barbie was the coach there, and he was still bad when they were there. But eventually, they produced some revenue on that side, and they took a big swing with Bruce Pearl, and that program is now fantastic. Less fantastic now that Stephen Pearl is the coach of that team. But they'll get rid of him soon and get a real coach in there and be okay. But they invested in that program. And it's sort of a build it and they will come type of situation. It feels like it needs to be the opposite. You need to show some success before you can justify making a building and infrastructure improvement like that. But I feel like it really is. You got to invest in the infrastructure first, and then the success follows that later.
Yeah. And I think, Tech has a good coach, regardless of what a loud portion of the fan base says. And I think the roster coming back, Carter, I mean, you can basically get everybody back with the exception of 3 or 4 guys. I don't know that Dallas probably doesn't come back. Bedford potentially with the JUCO ruling. I think Lowell is done.
Yeah, you'll lose him.
And there's one other guy I'm missing. But I mean, you get a Tyler Johnson, Ben Hammond, Jaden Shute, Amani Hansberry, a quarterback. I mean, that's a pretty good team to build around. It depends. I don't think this is going to be a program that competes, as top 4 in the ACC. That's not what Virginia Tech basketball is. But Virginia Tech basketball can make the NCAA tournament, and I think you have to get a little bit lucky too with injuries. You also have to get a little bit lucky with the schedule. But as far as X's and O's goes, they have not, I don't think, been on their game consistently enough this year, and I think Mike Young would admit that. I think there have been too many opportunities that have slipped away, regardless of other outside circumstances.
So I want to follow up on something that Andy said there real fast. So you mentioned, obviously, the men's basketball program, you want to be able to put something into Cassell to be able to, I guess, justify investing the way that they could into men's basketball. But I guess my follow-up to this whole thing is, how much of that is dependent on football success? If you start having football success the way that James Franklin potentially could at Virginia Tech, does it maybe make it an easier decision to move some stuff over into basketball long term? I guess is what I'm trying to ask. Or is any of this dependent on football success is probably what I'm trying to say.
I think it helps. I mean, Auburn made that stadium investment around when it won the national title in football. And I don't think those things are disconnected at all. I'm trying to remember the exact timing of when they built that thing. So maybe I'm off a little bit on it. But I mean, one helps the other. And honestly, not even just football success. I think James Franklin's presence helps. I mean, you heard Pete DeMore was on this thing. He's like, let James Franklin cook. Like, he's talking to boosters and this money's pouring in. And some of that does trickle down to other sports, and that does have an effect on things. So I do think football being successful would help immensely, because that's true of any athletic department that's out there. But simply just having somebody in that role as the head coach that is the face of the program, that speaks to boosters, that convinces boosters to open their wallets. I think Franklin has that ability, and I think that's his superpower more than anything. People want to talk about how he puts together a staff. He could be like a CEO, like all this stuff. I think what he's best at is in front of a room, whether that's a room of recruits, whether that's a room of coaches, a room of reporters, a room of boosters. I think he just has that magnetic personality that he can kind of own a room. And that's a very important skill to have in today's college football.
For context, that Neville Arena, which is very nice. I went there a couple years ago.
Which one is that? You're
gonna Auburn.
Auburn. Okay.
Auburn.
Is that what it's called? It was called the Auburn Arena.
Yeah, it's called Neville Arena now. It opened in October 2010. So around the national championship team.
There you go. What about you, Teel? How does football success kind of coincide with this whole thing?
Oh, it absolutely coincides, hand in hand. And now this would be an extreme case, Carter, but look at what Miami did this football season. Because of the Hurricanes not only reaching the national championship game, but also being the ACC's most viewed program on television this season, the Hurricanes are going to earn $30 million plus more than a baseline share of ACC revenue in fiscal 25-26. 30 million more. Think of what you could do with that kind of money. It wouldn't have to all go to football. Now, if James Franklin were to thread that needle and accomplish all that, would he want a lion's share of the 30 million? Hell yes, he would, and he would deserve it. But some of it could go to other sports, including men's basketball.
30 million. I mean, you could get a top quarterback in the conference to break his contract and come play for you for that kind of money. I mean, you could do a lot with 30 million. That actually might cover the 30. That might be the whole.
Might cover the lawyers.
It might cover the lawyers, the legal fees, all that stuff. So,
yeah, Carter, I would add it's all tied together. Mm-hmm. You look at Virginia Tech's financial report, and men's basketball occasionally is in the black, but everything else runs in the red. Everything's tied to football. It's not just men's basketball. It's women's basketball too. It's if you want any sport at Virginia Tech to be successful, it's what Andy just said about Pete DeMoore, right? I'm sure John Sheff and Pete DeMoore have different personalities, obviously, but I'm sure John Sheff's thinking the same thing, right? I'm sure Megan Duffy's thinking the same thing. Like, they need football to be good.
And those sports like softball and baseball, like a little bit does go a long way. Yeah. Like, it's not like you need like $15 million gift. Like, it'd be nice if you got that. But yeah, if some pocket change fell out of football on their way over to the stadium there, it wouldn't be the worst thing for sports like that.
No. All right. And with that, let's step aside and hear from our title sponsor, State Farm, here on Talking with Teel. Switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch. But what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, a group of State Farm agents that support TechSideline.com can switch you over to State Farm so you can start saving today. These State Farm agents and their team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. Check out Tech Sideline for the agent in your area. It's easy to switch and save. Just give them a call. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And welcome back to episode 22 of Talking with Teel, presented by State Farm. Looking around the ACC, got to talk about Seth Trimble, Carolina Duke down at the Smith Center. The Tar Heels led for 0.4 seconds in the entirety of the game, and they hit a game-winning three essentially at the horn from the corner to beat the Duke Blue Devils in the Smith Center. Your reaction to watching that, Teel, and the ensuing chaos with the double court storming in Chapel Hill.
Carter, did they storm the court at Allen Fieldhouse last night when they took down number one and undefeated Arizona?
No.
No. But I get it in the spontaneity of Trimble's shot. But, man, Carolina's security's got to be better than that in terms of getting the opposing team off the floor and into safe quarters. But what a game. This is the rivalry in the sport. It always delivers. And as iconic as Trimble's shot will be for decades, the pass from Dixon was even better. I mean, he is so deep into the paint. I don't know how he saw Trimble there in the corner. It was terrible defense, but to have seen that through the trees and to somehow get it there in time for him to launch that shot, what an amazing play from a freshman point guard.
That was an amazing game. For me, that shot's up there with like Austin Rivers in the Smith Center to beat Carolina probably a decade ago. That was a crazy game from Carolina where it trailed and trailed and trailed, and Ngongba fouled out, and Carolina kind of just kept going inside to Visar, and it worked. And they got the stops they needed. And I thought the biggest thing was, I think Duke only scored like one bucket in the final 3 minutes of that game. I mean, Carolina's defense in that final stretch was huge. I was a little bit surprised, not totally, that Duke's play and on its final possession was a one-on-one isolation ball with Cam Boozer. But credit to North Carolina. I don't know if that was the play drawn up, but it was well executed. And Seth Trimble, only guy on either team that has
played in the game before.
The only guy on Carolina has played in the game before, but he's the only fourth-year guy at that school, or on either side. He's been at Carolina since the very beginning, and pretty cool moment for him. And the great part about this rivalry is they got to go to Cameron later at the end of the season. So just a great way to kind of cap off a great college basketball Saturday.
It was incredible restraint by the bench, because the pass comes to him and he's wide open and he has time to set himself, but the bench will stands up, and I mean, he's literally feet away from them. In their excitement, they could have got too close or spooked him or something like that. They were rather calm until he got the shot off and hit it. I thought it was an impressive job.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Teel, you had a story this morning that came out in the Virginia Pilot and the Daily Press about Jim Phillips. He is approaching, I believe, his 5-year anniversary as the commissioner of the ACC, and you wrote a piece about this. Talked to Whit Babcock, I should say, Tim Sands, amongst multiple other colleagues within the ACC. How do you kind of reflect on the past 5 years from the commissioner of the ACC and his time so far in charge of the league?
Yeah, Carter, his fifth anniversary was February 1, that's when he took over from John Swafford in 2021. And it has been, suffice to say, a wild ride. And as Tim Sands says in the piece, near existential crises that Phillips faced. None of them, by the way, of his own doing. He's sitting there at his first ever ACC kickoff when news breaks that Texas and Oklahoma are heading to the SEC. And all hell is breaking loose in the landscape. And it just snowballed from there. And the lawsuits with Clemson and Florida State have, overshadowed so many things during his tenure. But I thought some of the most interesting comments in the piece were from Graham Neff, the Clemson athletic director, because here's a new AD who came in shortly after Jim Phillips did, and his school is suing the conference. And yet he said it never got personal from Phillips, that he navigated it just brilliantly and compartmentalized and still valued what Clemson and Florida State had to say about different ACC issues and decisions that they had to make and collaborate on. And I'll just share one quote from Neff, because as you guys know from hearing Phillips at his annual State of the Union in Charlotte at the kickoff, he's an incurable optimist, not only about the enterprise writ large, but the ACC specifically. And I asked Graham Neff, I said, so many people doubt the viability of this conference long term. I said, do you share? You're the AD of a school that sued this conference. do you share in his optimism about the ACC? And here's Neff's quote. I think you have to, and I don't mean that in a passive way. I work with a football coach who has that same level of energy and life outlook and professional outlook. And I share that a little bit too. That attitude and positivity, there's some force of will to that in some regard. I think how he leads with that from his chair has had some level of calming effect and progressive effect that we see throughout all the league's sports. You can't help but want to support and be part of the solutions with him.
That's very telling.
He has a very interesting stance on college sports because he is a true believer in the student athlete model, and like it almost feels anachronistic a little bit in the modern form of college sports where players are getting paid, and it's an earnest belief. I feel like some people can feel like that's out of touch a little bit, and you see the skyrocketing money in all these leagues, and like how are you going to keep up with the Big Ten and stuff like that? You wonder if he's the guy to do it, but he does kind of hold things together. He has a way with people. I mean, I've told this before, when I got laid off at the Athletic, he called me. Like, if Teel gets laid off, I'd expect him to call him. I'm like nothing reporter in the ACC, and he still took the time to like call me. He has a way with people like that. And I think that is earnest too. That doesn't feel phony or forced or anything like that. And, trying to hold this league together through this with all these competing viewpoints, I in the long run, I don't know if it's going to be possible. I think eventually things kind of they're just forces at work that are pulling things apart. But in the interim, I think he's doing as good of a job as somebody can to kind of keep everybody in the same tent right now and in the same league and somewhat pulling in the same direction. I think when those lawsuits happened, when everybody's just like, oh, this is going to break apart, then, I mean, if somebody was suing me, I would get angry at them. I would lash out at them. And he wasn't like that. I think that's what you have to be. You have to be bigger above the fray as a commissioner in these situations. I think he's the guy for that job, even though he's, been dealt perhaps an impossible hand to play.
Well said.
Teel, what is your reaction to Charles Bediako getting denied eligibility after 5 games at Alabama, the former G League player for the Crimson Tide?
Pleasantly surprised, Carter. I thought for sure the home court advantage, literally, that Bediako and his attorneys had would prevail. And I just think this is a different case. The lawyers try to say, well, look at all the other former professionals that are now playing college basketball. Well, Bediako, he renounced his eligibility to declare for the draft. When you do that, you're done. And then he went and played professional basketball in the States. So at that point, the NCAA has every right to enforce its eligibility rules. And God bless America, this particular judge agreed. And as Ross Dellinger from Yahoo, who remains the gold standard of reporting on all these national business issues, has written, the NCAA is batting above 500 in these eligibility matters when it comes to the courts. And while a lot of them are or have been in federal court, this one was very notable because it was in state court. And that is the route that Ole Miss is taking with Trinidad Chambliss to try to get him a 7th year. We'll see how that rolls. But I think the big takeaway here is this was a state court in Alabama turning down what the Crimson Tide wanted.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's big for the sport. I mean, you don't need that. Like, it's different. I know there are so many Europeans that come over after playing like a year professionally. There's outlines for it. And guys face suspensions, for playing in extra games or whatnot. Antonio Dorn did, right?
Yep.
But playing in college, going to the G League, and then coming back, it's like, what are we doing? What's
Right,
the point?
right.
So that did the right thing. Like Teel, I'm very glad. Just it would put such a bad light on college basketball if he was allowed to continue to play. And I don't know that he really had that much of an impact. He played okay for Alabama. But it's the principle of things. Like you can't just skirt the rules. And I'm glad that somebody said, "Hey, we're going to take an actual stance on this instead of, them going behind everybody's back and getting a court order to play." It's like, oh, nope, not happening anymore. This is it.
At what point do we have to look at Nate Oates and the coaches in these situations and go, "Why are you recruiting these guys?" Like he's made some very questionable decisions about who to play over the years. I mean, they had some legal disputes, shall we say, that perhaps should have precluded some players from being on the court. But I mean, it's not like this guy showed up. It's like, well, we have to take him. It's like, no, they went out and actively recruited this guy to their roster. So I think at a certain point, maybe just you just have to shame these coaches that go after these players in the first place. But I think it's just a weak decision. It's like, can't you win with the players you have? You have to go out and get a free agent in the middle of the season that's a pro player to help you out. He wasn't even that good on the court. But, I mean, at some point, maybe they will find somebody who is really good and makes a difference with this whole thing. I think it's just, I don't know. We need to bring shame back to college sports. And I think you're starting to see it turn a little bit because Nate Oates has gotten quite a bit of criticism about this whole thing.
Yeah, and honestly, probably as he should. And it's funny you mentioned the other case there a couple of years ago. Brandon Miller was involved in that brawl in the Hornets game last night that I'm sure everybody saw. He was involved in that brawl last night.
Okay.
That was
nuts.
Very, very bad at the Spectrum Center. So
that's still only the second worst brawl the Pistons have been involved in. Can't be that bad.
What year was that? Like mid 2000s?
Oh, yeah, the Malice in the Palace, 2004, 5?
4 or
Was it
5?
that far
Okay.
long ago?
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. All right, got a question from the message board here. Hokie from Bedford, Virginia, I assume, is one that knows the ACC so well. Where is Virginia Tech lacking the most to the others in the league with football, men's basketball, and women's basketball? Facilities, infrastructure, all that jazz. What are your thoughts, Teel?
I think it depends on the sport. With football right now, it's certainly not money. I really don't think it's infrastructure. I think most recently with football, it's been in large measure coaching and recruiting, and that appears to be changing. Now with men's basketball, I think you can count or you can point toward revenue, resources, and such. The same with women's basketball, but women's basketball isn't that far removed from a Final Four appearance with Kenny Brooks, and we're only year 2 with Megan Duffy, and I think there needs to be some patience there. I don't think location has much to do with it at all. I mean, guys, Iowa State might be a top regional seed in the NCAA tournament, a number 1 seed. If Iowa State can thrive in college athletics, if Texas Tech and Lubbock, you can exist or reside in outposts and still thrive in this environment. It's a matter of getting the coaching and the investment and at the risk of using the A word, alignment with your campus. That's what.
Yeah, I'd say with basketball, the glaring thing that's lacking there, and I'm going to keep ripping on Cassell Coliseum, but it's an outdated arena.
Sure.
And it's not a modern facility like some of these other places are. And I think they're losing a lot of revenue because of that. And that hurts both of those programs. Football funding now, after this Board of Visitors thing, I think that is up to speed. But for the last 10 years, that has been a little on the lacking side. I mean, we've seen that. And I think they have been slow to adjust to the paying players. I mean, I was going to say pay for play, but that is definitely not what it is, according to the NCAA in every lawsuit they find, even though in reality that's what it is. They have not invested in the roster as much as those other places. They have not gone to the places that some of these schools have with paying players and bringing in the kind of talent that they need to. Last year, they sort of set the stage of it early. It's like, man, these prices are outrageous. It's like, that might be true, but those are the prices. You got to pay that to play the game, and they haven't quite done it. Now, I think they're making inroads on that now, but that in addition to the coaching, I think you need good coaching and good players together. I think that has been the big problem, because I think if you look at the facilities at Virginia Tech, they're fine football-wise. Do they have a dedicated football building? No. Seems like they're kind of turning it into that, even though it's not one of these, brand new shiny buildings like that. Lane Stadium's great. Indoor facility is, most schools would be envious of the indoor facility that the Hokies have, and the practice area and everything sort of being centrally located there. So I don't think any of those are holding the program back right now. I think it has been the funding on the roster. It has been the coaching of those players. And I think they address both those by bringing in James Franklin.
From a basketball perspective, I think that they've got a standalone facility in Hawthorne that's pretty nice. There's a lot of good stuff in there. But I look at Cassell and it's just kind of there, right? Like you don't get much out of it. It's a dated building. When
it's rocking, it's a good home field advantage or home court advantage, but I don't think that makes up for the lack of revenue that you get from the place.
You can keep. I think there are ways to keep the home court advantage while also while renovating it and making it more of a modern building. I think with both programs, we've seen the men, quite a bit of investment gone into it. Went from having a really, really bad roster and one of the worst seasons in a decade last year, much better in the tournament conversation. Whether or not they make it, we'll see. And I think with the women, I think the women are in a good spot. Maybe they probably need a little bit more investment, but I think it's okay. And I think they're on the cusp of making the tournament too. And back-to-back years, they were the first team out last year, right? You change one result and they're in the field. They're on the cusp of making it this year. So I think they're in a pretty good spot. I wouldn't say come to normalize making a Final Four, winning an ACC championship in women's basketball. But I think if Megan Duffy can get this program up and rolling, over 2-3 years, I think you're going to see a team that will be consistently in the top half of the league.
Just to wrap it up real fast, and Teel, we'll start with you here. We mentioned Cassell Coliseum a lot during this podcast. When is it going to reach a point where Virginia Tech has no choice but to do something with it? There's all this debate right now about the Smith Center in Chapel Hill. But when are you going to reach a point at Virginia Tech where there has to be something done to Cassell Coliseum, essentially, from a premium seating standpoint, from a luxury seating standpoint, to just the overall up-to-date style that it would need to probably incur in the next 4 or 5 years?
Aside, Carter, from football's decline, and obviously that tops the list, but if you ask Whit Babcock what his disappointments have been during his 12 years as Virginia Tech's athletic director, number 2 would clearly be the inability to have gotten something done besides just cosmetic improvements to the basketball arena. And they've done studies and they've looked at, do we do something like Clemson, where the Tigers played home games for a season in Greenville while Little John was being renovated? Could the Hokies do something like that in Roanoke? Or could they somehow still play at Cassell while upgrading the place? There's so many components to this, and I don't sense right now that they are close to figuring that piece out.
Here it's a luxury. You have to get football fixed first.
Yes.
Nobody's going to be like, we're going to pour however hundreds of millions of dollars into a Cassell renovation when the football team is still going 3-9. Like, that needs to be fixed first. Football eats before the rest of the programs at Virginia Tech do. So I think it's on the right track with Franklin. We'll see what the results are on the field. But if they get that rolling, then all of a sudden you can start talking about other improvements to other sports. And I think Cassell will be high on that list at that point. But if you're telling me, hey, should we renovate Cassell first, or should we invest in the football program to get that going correct?
Sure.
99% of Virginia Tech fans are going to say, get the football program right.
Yeah, I think there's a list of to-do items, and Cassell's been on there for a while. And part of it is you need a giant investment to get it started. It's not like you
need some 8-figure donations.
Yes,
Correct.
yes.
You can't just go, all right, we're going to start on this project today and we're going to go 1 million by 1 million and you know what I mean? It's like you need a large donation, a large sum. And part of it also is, I think the time, because they put out renderings and stuff a couple years ago. At the time, it was, oh, great. And then NIL came into the picture.
Right.
And you go from, oh, hey, facilities and let's upgrade Cassell to let's
upgrade the roster.
Let's invest it in the players. And it's one of those things where that's still the narrative. Yes, revenue sharing, obviously, but you're still paying players through NIL. And so it's like it's this weird tightrope you're walking because, yes, you want to renovate it, but your priority is the roster. That's kind of a secondhand thing. So unless you get some giant donation, I think it's going to be hard to jumpstart it because you're not, like Andy said, you're not moving funds from another place over here. Like that is kind of a secondary thing. If you can do it, it'd be great. It is not that it's not a priority, but it's just like, it's a little bit more difficult. It's more challenging. It's not as simple as snap your fingers and boom, we've got an 8-figure donation.
No, I agree.
So
it is, they need to look at it as an investment piece though.
Correct.
Because right now they're losing money in men's basketball, and not every, I'm not sure the total number of ACC schools that make money on men's basketball, but I have to imagine it's a good number. Right now that's a negative on the bottom line of Virginia Tech, and that's got to change. And before they can change that, so I think if you sell it as that and go, well, we're losing money in basketball right now, you could be making money, and that's an investment for the program in the future. You could bring better players in with more money like that. So I don't know. It's a math problem that I'm glad I don't have to solve.
Yeah.
Well, Teel, always really appreciate your time. Thanks for hopping on and look forward to chatting again next week.
Absolutely, guys. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
For the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer David Teel, David Cunningham, Andy Bitter, Nick Brown, I'm Carter Hill saying so long from episode 22 of Talking with Teel, presented by State Farm. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you very soon.